The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. This is Les Smith from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. I am pleased to welcome you all to this evening's informational session for Wolverine Worldwide's Groundwater-Surface Water GSI Investigation Response Activity Plan. And again, pleased to welcome you all. I would like to also introduce as our primary presenter this evening will be Karen Vorse. She is with the Eagle Remediation and Redevelopment Division. She is a project manager there, and she will be our primary speaker this evening. Karen will be providing some information about the GSI Investigation Response Activity Plan, and we will also have a conversation following that presentation, just some question and answer session, so that you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of both of Karen and several agency staff at that time. Also, throughout today's presentation, we will be providing information about ways that you can submit official comments to the department about this particular response activity plan. Eagle is in the midst of a 30-day public comment period, and so this will be an opportunity for you to hear information about this response activity plan, and we will provide locations where you can provide those written comments. And lastly, we will provide you with contact information so you can find out who you can talk to regarding additional questions. With this webinar this evening, all lines are muted. If you have questions, you may use the question or chat function that's located in the webinar toolbar. And as with all webinars that we host here in Eagle, the webinar is being recorded. Our plan is to have the webinar available within a couple of days following the webinar for you to view at a later date and to share with interested parties. So here's how tonight's meeting will work. In a few moments, Karen Vorse, who again is the Eagle Remediation Redevelopment Project Manager, will begin her presentation. Karen will walk you through some of the details of the draft GSI Investigation Response Activity Plan. Before we have that conversation, I'd like to take talk very briefly about how we will handle questions tonight. As we go through this presentation, please feel free to enter any questions you would like entered in today, in the question box located in the webinar control panel that's located in your upper right-hand corner of your screen. Tonight's panelists during the question and answer session, consisting of agency staff, will attempt to answer any questions that you have about the response activity plan. You may also send any comments that you have concerning the response activity plan to the email address that is on the screen. Now, for any individuals who may be listening by telephone only and are not able to see the screen, the email address that we have for submitting written comments is eagle-rrd-housestreet@michigan.gov. That's EGLE-RRD, as in Robert David, House Street as one word, HOUSE Street, STREET, @michigan.gov. The email address is also located on the www.michigan.gov/Belmont webpage. Again, for our listeners who are in listen-only mode by phone, if you have called in by phone and are not participating by internet, unfortunately, we will not be able to unmute your phone line during the question and answer session. However, if you are participating by phone only and have questions about tonight's webinar topic, there are a couple of ways you can get answers to those questions. If you can access the internet following tonight's meeting, you may email your questions to the eagle-rrd-housestreet@michigan.gov email address, or you may contact Karen Vorse, the project manager, at area code 616-439-8008, and I'll repeat that. It's Karen's telephone number is area code 616-439-8008. We will again share this information towards the end of today's conversation. And one more item of note before we get into Karen's presentation. Again, to write a question, there's a question box in the webinar control panel. If during the Q&A session you would like to ask a verbal question, you will find in the webinar control panel a little hand with a green up arrow. This is an indication. You click on that and that's indicating you want to raise your hand to ask a question. So we will be able to see that. If you have chosen to raise your hand to ask a question and then later have decided to you've changed your mind and want to lower your hand, you will see a hand with a red down arrow, and that's to lower your hand. So basically, to ask a question, click the green up arrow. To change your mind and lower your hand, it's the red down arrow. And it might be a little confusing, but we'll go over it again during the question and answer period. And with that, I will step aside here and transfer the mic over to Karen Vorse, who is the project manager, who will now provide us a presentation on the Groundwater-Surface Water Investigation and Response Activity Plan. Here you are, Karen.
All right, thanks, Les.
And there you are.
Okay. All right, let's start this presentation. Can you see it okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this virtual online public meeting. A little different than what we normally have been doing over the past 3 years. And tonight, as Les had stated, we are going to be focusing our discussion on the Groundwater-Surface Water GSI Interface Response Activity Plan. And this is a draft plan that Wolverine has submitted for agency Eagle review. And we are opening up this review to the public as well and asking for any public comments that you may have on this plan. So before I get too far deep into the presentation, I did just kind of want to give a little bit of background in case there's some folks who aren't as familiar with this area and the history of the site. Back this past February, on February 19th, 2020, there is a consent decree that was established between the state of Michigan, the plaintiff, Plainfield and Algoma Townships, who were the intervening plaintiffs, and Wolverine Worldwide, the defendant. This consent decree was approved by U.S. District Court Judge Janet T. Neff of the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Michigan on February 19th, 2020. And so what this consent decree does is it basically serves as the framework for all future PFAS response activities that Wolverine is to perform in what's called the North Kent Study Area. And that area is shown on this figure on the slide. It's actually taken from Appendix A of the consent decree. And this is approximately 20 to 25 square miles in northern Kent County, spanning approximately to the north to 12-mile road, south down to the Grand River, as far west to Pine Island Drive, and then as far east as to downtown Rockford, where the Tannery site sits. And again, you can see on this figure that the Rogue River, kind of one of the major rivers, encircles the North Kent study area, and then the Grand River is located on the southern boundary of the study area. Wolverine must conduct all of their response activities under the consent decree, subject to Eagle oversight, and that's kind of why we're having this public comment period, because we are in process of reviewing and approving and providing our comments on the GSI response activity plan. So some of the general requirements of the consent decree that Wolverine must undertake includes municipal water expansion, which is specified in Section 6 of the consent decree. It also discusses ongoing requirements for filter operation and maintenance, which is again discussed in Section 7.5. The residential drinking water well sampling requirements that are ongoing in the area is discussed in Section 7.6. There's also work that's required at the downtown Rockford Tannery site for source control measures. That is discussed in section 7.7 of the consent decree, as well as source controls at the actual House Street disposal site in Belmont. That's discussed in section 7.8. Additionally, there's numerous groundwater investigations that are going to be required to be conducted within the North Kent study area. Those are discussed in 7.9. The reason why we're here tonight is to discuss the Groundwater-Surface Water Interface, or GSI, investigation. That's specifically discussed in the consent decree in section 7.10 and Appendix S. Today's meeting again will focus on the GSI response activity plan submittal. That document, the GSI plan, is posted on our website at www.michigan.gov/Belmont. It's also known as the House Street Belmont website. So if you need to find a copy of that, that's where you can find it. It's also been provided in hard copy to local municipalities such as Algoma Township City Hall, Plainfield Township City Hall, and the City of Rockford Municipal Hall. And so if you don't have access to the internet or cannot have electronic capabilities of looking at this, you can call up your local municipality and figure out a way to go pick up a hard copy of the document to review during this comment period. So Appendix S of the consent decree, it's the Groundwater-Surface Water Interface Statement of Work. This was basically a general outline of Wolverine's proposed approach and rationale for how they were going to conduct this initial GSI investigation of the Rogue River. And so this Appendix S, scope of work was publicly noticed and approved as part of the consent decree. And we did host a meeting, it seems like a long time ago, but it was only 4 or so months ago, in early February for the consent decree, and a meeting was hosted by our Attorney General's office. And so this is kind of the regulatory basis for what the requirements of this GSI response activity plan, the minimums that needed to be included in that. And so this is just a slide we kind of wanted to put together to take a look at Appendix S and how it relates to Wolverine's draft GSI response activity plan. So again, Appendix S was just a general outline. It includes the investigation approach, which really has 3 main components: the installation of piezometers, the measurement of water levels in staff gauges, and the collection of pore water sampling. We'll go into all those definitions of those on the next slide. Appendix S also established investigation locations along the Rogue River where we had the most concern of potential PFAS venting into groundwater concerns. So those were identified on a figure in Appendix S as well. So the GSI response activity plan contains the actual details and the specifics of what was discussed in Appendix S. And this is the plan that we are requesting for public comments on. So just an example, like portions of this GSI plan that would be subject to this comment period would include any portions of the conceptual site model. That's all of section 2 and includes many different figures and tables and cross sections. Any of the sampling procedures, protocols, and methodologies that are discussed in sections 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the GSI plan. Also the schedule that's included in section 8. Something you can also look for during your review is that in section 3, that's the statement of work. That should match what the statement of work said in Appendix S of the consent decree, since that was the basis of this. So what is the actual goal of this GSI investigation that this plan focuses on? The study objective really is a simple one. It's to investigate if PFAS contaminated groundwater is venting to the Rogue River at concentrations above applicable cleanup criteria. And so what that means is here in Michigan, we have standards that PFOA and PFOS cannot exceed if it's in groundwater that is venting into a surface water body, such as the Rogue River. Those levels are 12,000 parts per trillion for PFOA and 12 parts per trillion for PFOS. And so this study was basically created to try and do an initial step to investigate that study objective. So the first component is comprised of installation of piezometers, which are basically metal pipes that are driven into the ground on the Rogue River bank. And those are used to demonstrate that the groundwater is indeed actually flowing into the river. On this slide, we included a photo of a scientist just hand driving in the 1-inch diameter pipe into the ground, into a riverbank, just for reference there. Another portion of this investigation is the measurement of water levels on existing staff gauges that are located within the river. So there are existing places that have these gauges that will indicate the water level. And GSI, Wolverine's environmental consultant conducting the work, will be utilizing those as part of this plan and collecting measurements from those. Additionally, there will be the collection of pore water samples from within the actual Rogue River bottom. And those will be collected at 2 different depths at each pore water sample location. One being from 12 to 18 inches below the river sediment bottom, and then another 18 to 24 inches below the river sediment. When pore water is collected, those are collected from, again, a stainless steel probe, very kind of similar to the piezometer pipe that you see in this photo. It is a stainless steel probe that's hand driven into the river bed. It has a 6-inch screen slot at the bottom of it, and it's just driven down to those desired depths. So from 12 to 18 inches, and then from 18 to 24 inches. Once that's set, there's tubing that's put down in the well. A pump is used to then pump the water out of that pipe, and different water chemistry parameters are collected while the water is stabilizing, so we know that a representative sample of the groundwater that's venting into the Rogue River is being obtained. So they'll make notes regarding, pH, water temperature, the conductivity, dissolved oxygen levels, and oxidation redox potential, or ORP, just to name a few. Then after the water stabilizes, when the actual samples will be collected for PFAS analysis. The piezometers are used generally to measure the water levels. And those are going to be measured for at least a 2-week monitoring period to establish that groundwater is indeed flowing into the Rogue River at near these pore water sampling locations. So in the plan, you'll read that measurements of staff gauges and piezometers, groundwater level measurements, will be taken on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, so 3 times a week for at least 2 weeks. And we want to be able to see those water levels and verify that there is flow that is flowing into the Rogue River from those measurements. So in the GSI response activity plan, there's a figure included. It's figure 18. This is probably going to be one of the more useful figures to take a look at. It shows all of the proposed piezometer and pore water sampling locations. Obviously, this is a very large study area, so we're going to kind of break it down into 5 different sections to make it a little bit more manageable to kind of go through and focus in on those areas. So on this slide, you should see, 5 circles. We're going to start kind of in a clockwise rotation. So northwest of House Street along the Rogue River will kind of be the first area that we take a look at. Then we'll move west, kind of northwest, up to what we call the Woven Jewel Northwest Investigation Area. That is northwest of the Woven Jewel source area. And then moving kind of further clockwise to the east is the Woven Northeast / Area 19 investigation area along the Rogue River. Moving to the south, we then enter into the Woven Childsdale investigation area. Again, that is associated with the Woven Jewel source area based on groundwater flow, which does flow in multiple directions from the Woven Jewel source area. Unfortunately, that disposal area is located on a groundwater divide, causing groundwater to flow in multiple directions. And then last but not least is the southeast of House Street investigation area. That's obviously southeast of the House Street disposal site, where the main plume that emanates from House Street goes toward the Rogue River. So the first area, northwest of House Street, we're focusing in right there on FL-PW-1, FL-PW2, and then FL-GSI-1. And what those represent, the PWs represent pore water sample locations, and then the GSI-1 represents the actual piezometer location that we had talked about earlier. So 2 pore water locations are proposed there and 1 piezometer location northwest of House Street. Moving up to the north, we go into the northwest Woven Jewel area, and 2 piezometers are proposed in that area, along with 4 pore water locations. And on this figure, you'll see a star, a red star, that just represents the source area, so either the House Street disposal site or the Woven Jewel source area. And then the blue circles represent monitoring wells that Wolverine's environmental consultant, GSI, has installed. And then the pink wells are additional wells that GSI has installed, but north of 10 Mile, located in the Woven Jewel area. So it just kind of signifies either the House Street monitoring well area or the Woven Jewel monitoring well location area. Continuing in clockwise motion, we're now to northeast of the Woven Jewel area, also referred to as Area 19. 3 different piezometers are proposed in this location. Those are shown, as you can see in the legend, by kind of a little cross. There's 7 pore water locations proposed, and then those are represented by the circle. And then GSI Wolverine will also be sampling a couple existing Eagle monitoring wells. Those are depicted here by that orange circle, kind of up along near the Rogue River. So that will also be sampled for PFAS to aid in that investigation. Moving down to the south, we move into the Woven Childsdale investigation area. 2 piezometer locations are proposed there, along with 6 pore water sampling locations. You'll also notice in the Rogue River here, zoomed in, the red triangles, which are those staff gauges where water levels will be measured in the Rogue River as part of this as well. So zooming into the area southeast of House Street, there's 8 piezometers. This is a little bit larger of an investigation area. So we have, Wolverine has proposed 8 piezometers in that location, 9 pore water sampling locations, and there are 2 existing monitoring wells along the Rogue River that will also be sampled for PFAS to aid in this investigation of this area. Along the Rogue River, and then also south, you'll see the piezometers along the Grand River. So after, you kind of might be wondering, well, when is this work going to be completed? Right now, the plan states that they anticipate getting access this summer, getting all the necessary permits and legwork done. And then samples would be collected during fall 2020 low flow conditions, so through early October. And this is, barring any major access issues or any access issues related to COVID-19 impact. But that is the goal right now, is for them to collect these samples in fall 2020. Now, something that's important to make note of is that this GSI response activity plan is kind of just the first step in the overall investigation of the groundwater surface water interface pathway in the North Kent study area. So within 90 days of Wolverine receiving the analytical data from this investigation, Wolverine will summarize the results from that and then submit an additional work plan to Eagle for the installation of permanent GSI monitoring well locations. So that will kind of go into the phase 2 of the GSI investigation, where they're actually install, with a machinery, a permanent well location that's not hand driven, of different monitoring wells at different depths along the river edge to be able to monitor over a period of time the groundwater concentrations that would be venting into the Rogue River. All of these requirements related to the GSI investigation of the Rogue River can be found, again, in the consent decree in section 7.10. So the next steps related to this report review are, we'll continue to take comments on this through June 13th, 2020. This was a 30-day public comment period, so it started on May 14th. You can email your written comments to that House Street email box, which again is eagle-rrd-housestreet@michigan.gov. You can also mail in written comments to me at the district office, which I'll provide that address on the next slide and read that off. After the public comment period closes on June 13th, Eagle will prepare a response document. And this document basically will summarize and answer and address all of the comments that we received from the public during this comment period. That summary document will be posted on our website, on the Belmont website. Again, that's at www.michigan.gov/Belmont. And then after that, we complete our final review of the GSI plan, incorporate any of the public comments that we need to, and then provide our feedback to Wolverine for them to incorporate into a final work plan. Now, there's obviously a lot of moving parts and pieces associated with the consent decree as a whole outside of the GSI response activity plan that we're talking about tonight. So we just wanted to make everyone aware of that. Obviously, just above the GSI response activity plan on this chart is the filter O&M plan. We did have a public meeting, a virtual town hall for that yesterday evening that people were able to attend. And that also has the same comment period as this GSI plan. So May 14th through June 13th. After this GSI plan, the next response activity plan that Eagle received is the residential well resampling plan. That is actually already posted on our Belmont website as well. So you won't need to wait for the official comment period to start reviewing that. You can start looking at that at your leisure. And we still need to determine the public meeting date and the actual dates of the comment period, but it will be a 30-day comment period for that. We did receive that plan on May 4th, and that is posted on our website at michigan.gov/Belmont. The next 5 response activity plans that are due to Eagle that we will also open up for public comment, those are due to us on June 18th, 2020. And those are the 5 different groundwater investigation area scopes of work or response activity plans. And those are basically different areas within the North Kent study area that the majority of the people are what's called the filter areas. So outside of municipal water service areas that we are requiring additional groundwater delineation and investigation in. So those 5 work plans will also have a public meeting associated with those and a 30-day comment period. and that's to be determined once we get that delivered to us. And the last response activity plan that we are going to receive this year is in August 17th, 2020, and that's for the perimeter wells. Those are going to be monitoring wells that Wolverine installs around basically the edges of the North Kent study area to monitor groundwater over time. Again, that's due in August 17th, and we'll have a public comment period for that and also a public meeting that will be announced. So just a reminder, the consent decree and any of these response activity plans as are submitted, they all are posted online on the michigan.gov/Belmont website. And also, if you do not have access to a computer, you can contact me and I can help you obtain a hard copy of these documents as well. So in summary, you know, we do want to hear from you. We want to engage the community and receive feedback from you on especially this GSI draft response activity plan. So you can continue to submit your written comments through June 13th. And I'll be a broken record and read that email address one more time for folks. That mailbox that you can submit your written comments to is eagle, E-G-L-E -RRD House Street @michigan.gov, or you can mail me written comments. Snail mail still works perfectly fine. Attention to Karen Vorse with eagle, E-G-L-E -RRD. That stands for Remediation and Redevelopment Division. Our offices are located at 350 Ottawa Avenue Northwest, Unit 10 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, 49503. Also, just to make note, when you are submitting written comments on these plans, especially this GSI plan, just make a note which response activity plan you're commenting on, because we want to make sure we have the comment associated with the correct plan if there's more than one being noticed at the same time. If anyone ever has any questions about you know, this GSI plan during this comment period or any other plans, you can definitely reach me on my work cell phone, which is 616-439-8008, or you can shoot me over an email, and that's just my last name and first initial. That's vorsk@michigan.gov, V as in Victor, O-R-C-E, the letter K, @michigan.gov. And that really kind of summarizes, completes my portion of the presentation this evening. Les, I'll hand it back over to you for some instructions on questions.
All right. Thank you, Karen. That was a wonderful presentation. There's a lot packed in there. And yes. And I'm sure there's questions. I'm sure there's questions from our attendees this evening. So while we're waiting, and I see at least one hand right now. So while before I bring on the first question, I'm gonna wait for your panelists here. So our panelists this evening for the question and answer session will be Karen Vorse, Abby Hendershot from the Grand Rapids District Office, Danielle Allison Yoakum from the Michigan Attorney General's Office, and Mark Worrell from the Grand Rapids Remediation and Redevelopment Division. So this will be your panelists to help answer any questions that you have this evening. And while we're waiting for Mark to join us, there he is. I see right now, I see a hand.
Cool.
So we have our first question from the audience. Richard, I'm going to unmute your line. Richard, are you there?
Yes.
You have the floor. You have the floor.
Okay. Thanks, Karen. And got several questions. First of all, on the pore water samples, it says in the work plan that they're going to be collecting 2 samples at each location. Are those going to be quasi duplicates, or are they going to be collected spatially apart, or?
Yeah, so there should be 2 different intervals collected at each pore water sample location. Kind of a shallower interval at least a foot down, so it's estimated between 12 and 18 inches. And then in that same location, they'll hand drive down the probe further and get another sample from 18 to 24 inches as well.
Okay. So there's no, you're not going to have an idea if there's any spatial heterogeneity at each location. You're just going to be taking, they're going to be taking one sample to represent the entire plume area in between the pore water sample A and pore water sample B. I was looking at, you know, some of the pore areas, like where the House Street plume is coming into the Rogue River, and there's one sample there, and you know, there's going to be some variability with depth, and there's going to be some variability with length. And if you collect one sample, you're not going to know whether that's representative or not unless you take, you know, additional samples. And it's kind of like too with field duplicates. I mean, you take a field duplicate to verify that you're collecting, it's representative of the spatial, you know, variability. And if you only collect one sample in each location, you don't really have an idea whether that sample is representative of the pore water entering the river, just because it could be very variable as far as the sediment conditions and.
Right, and so that's kind of why this is just viewed as the first step of the GSI investigation, because of that. And this is going to be data that's going to be used to help place our permanent monitoring well sampling points that will be monitored a number of times, different quarters and whatnot. And so there will be field, you know, there will be data validation and QA/QC samples collected during this, just as part of the normal procedure that GZA conducts. And then pore water samples, they will be sampled like low flow style. So, you know, groundwater chemistry will need to be collected to make sure the sample they are getting is representative of the groundwater venting into the river at each location at the 2 depths at each pore water location. Mm-hmm. But I would say that that could be a good comment that you could definitely provide us.
Well, I'm definitely, and speaking for the CAG too, I'm definitely concerned about coverage, and just there's, you know, the duplicates and spikes and things like that are field duplicates. Well, there's duplicates in here, but I don't see any field duplicates for the pore water, and I think there should be some, you know, some attempt to determine whether if you put a sample right next to it, you're getting the same value, and some idea of whether, as you're going from the shoreline into the river, that there's some degree of heterogeneity or something. There just seems to be more samples that should be taken to characterize it further, and whether you collect them in this investigation or in future investigations.
Right.
And then, you know, I'll certainly put that in writing. I don't see any river samples being collected. It seems to me if, you know, you're collecting estimates of groundwater flow and pore water and concentrations, that you know, if you're doing a good study or a good estimate of groundwater flow, you should be able to kind of mass balance how the river is picking up contaminants from that data. You should be able to sample above and then sample below the plume area and see that it's picking up. I mean, some of the plume areas probably aren't contributing that much, but other ones, you should be able to see maybe increases in concentration in the river. And I've seen some sets of data that do show the river is picking up concentrations as it's going downstream. So is there any thoughts to doing that? I mean, that's kind of a validation of how good the groundwater flow is. If they say there's no groundwater flow, or it's not coming in at levels above the GSI, yet the river is obviously picking up concentrations, there's something wrong with the study then.
Yeah, and I would say definitely put that in the comment for sure. But from our point of view, we focused on areas based on our hydrogeo investigation, and Mark, you can step in here too to elaborate more, where we had most concern of the river having the chance of groundwater venting into surface water above our criteria, which is our compliance point for GSI. And so, you know, we do have certain surface water data already collected for the Rogue River. We have foam samples. We know that there is PFAS in the surface water. And this really needs to be done to investigate and pinpoint where that groundwater is interacting with the river and venting into the river, causing, you know, those concentrations. So it's definitely a phased approach, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, and these initial locations were really based on where we know plumes would be likely to be interacting with the Rogue River. You know, the R1 area, there's a little bit more heterogeneity, so that might be a little bit less clear. But there's also, I think, some difficulties with sampling PFAS in the surface water to get a good representative sample of how it's behaving within the water column, or what you're seeing, an accurate portrayal of the risk in that surface water, where if you go to where the groundwater is interacting with that surface water body, that really hopefully can give you kind of your worst case scenario.
Yeah, okay. And then I see the Tannery area is not sampled. You're just assuming that it's going to be all controlled and there's no need to do that.
Yeah, so that's going to be addressed through the response activity plan submitted at the Tannery site.
Okay.
They'll be having monitoring associated with their interceptor system that they'll have to conduct there. That's a good question.
Okay. That's it for me right now, and we'll send some written comments then. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Panelists. There's a lot of information that's packed in this webinar this evening with this response activity plan. When will the recording for this webinar be available, and where will this information be posted when it's available?
Yeah, I think after tonight, we send off this webinar to be closed captioned, which is awesome for folks to be able to see that. And so depending on how long that takes, with the processing of that, we try to get these submitted up online within a few days. It might be, you know, next week, depending on availability of staff. But they will be posted on the House Street Belmont website for sure. A copy of this presentation, and we'll get a link to this recording. So if folks couldn't make it tonight and watch it live, they'll be able to watch it to their heart's desire, recorded. And then I also believe Eagle has a YouTube channel, right, Les?
Yes. Yes.
This is posted on, all of our webinars are posted on there as well.
Okay. I am temporarily out of questions, and I don't see any raised hands, but we have lots of folks that are still on with us. Is there anything you want to re-emphasize from the any points you want to re-emphasize? I know you've talked about the June 13th date to submit comments. You've provided the access points for the email address and how to contact you for questions. Is there anything you want to reiterate? Any particular points you want to make sure people are left with before we close out this evening?
I'm sure that there's a lot. I know that this document, you know, is 596 total pages, I believe, with all of the attachments. So that is a pretty large document to go through. So if anyone if they think of any questions after this, you know, they are more than welcome to contact any of us on this panel, call us, email us. A lot of probably the folks watching already have our contacts saved in their phone. And we can go through this with you. Obviously, we're generating our own internal review comments and things that we see with this. So we may be able to help elaborate on a couple things. Just so everyone knows, attached to this, there is an Appendix A that kind of goes through all of the groundwater monitoring well logs and soil boring logs that kind of are part of that conceptual site model portion of this. That just tries to kind of discuss the lay of the land and the geology and the hydrogeology of a very large area. But then in Appendix B, GSI, Wolverine's environmental consultant, included their standard operating procedures. So feel free to take a look at those as well to see if you have any questions or issues with the collection process of the data. I think that would be a really good place to look as well. And then also focusing on the sampling and analytical procedures in Section 5 of the table of contents, and then also the investigation methodology. Definitely looking for comments on those sections, especially, and look forward to seeing that email box have questions come in.
So Karen, I'll just jump in. This is Abby. I would also just really appreciate if people want to give us comments, do it in writing, go through the email box so that we can get all of those comments compiled into one document and put that responsiveness document together. But know that this plan is just the first step in Wolverine's investigation. It's going to guide all of the recommendations for future response actions that might need to be associated with the Rogue River. And so this isn't meant to be comprehensive. This is a guideline framework for the starting place. And so, your comments today may not be incorporated necessarily in this particular piece, but long term we can try to incorporate those because we aren't looking at the Rogue River necessarily by itself, but we're trying to look at the whole ecosystem surrounding the river, the groundwater, all the drainage, everything that goes with it, the geology, so that we can make sure that we do that Wolverine is going to be able to do the best that they can to protect the river and take care of some of these issues that are still out there that need to be investigated.
Well, okay. Thank you, Karen, Danielle, Abby, and Mark. Thank you to our panelists this evening, and to all of you meeting attendees. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to hear this very informative information. Again, we've provided the contact information on how to submit comments and how to reach Karen if needed. I don't see any other questions. I don't have any new hands raised, so I'm not going to keep anyone any longer. I just want to say thank you to all of you for your attendance. We will share the slides and a recording and a closed caption copy of today's conversation. Since you are attendees, we will notify you when that information is made available, and it also will be posted on our websites in the coming days. It might be early next week, but just keep an eye out for that. And again, we thank you for your time and attention, and have a wonderful evening.
Okay. Thanks.